This should be interesting to say the least. So, I don't talk a lot, and I have no interest in talking a lot. Oh, there goes my phone. So, yeah. I am gonna try something different, at least for me. And, yeah, I'm going to... Oh, there we go. Listen to a book.
A Planet Named Shayol.
And, yeah.
1.
Actually, I should start. So, this is a short story by Cordwainer Smith. It's from the Rediscovery of Man. I'd urge everybody to check out this this. I got this from a book called The Rediscovery of Man, and it's got like all of his short fiction. Cordwainer Smith's an interesting guy. Look him up on your own if you're actually interested. This is pretty cool. Pretty cool story.
A Planet Named Shayol. 1. There was a tremendous difference between the liner and the ferry in Mercer's treatment. On the liner, the attendants made jibes when they brought him his food. "Scream good and loud," said one rat-faced steward, "and then we'll know it's you when they broadcast the sounds of punishment on the Emperor's birthday." The other fat steward ran the tip of his wet red tongue over his thick purple-red lips one time and said, "Stands to reason, man. If you heard all the time, the whole lot of you would die. Something pretty good must happen along with, whatchamacallit. Maybe you turn into a woman. Maybe you turn into 2 people. Listen, cousin, if it's real crazy fun, let me know." Mercer said nothing. Mercer had enough troubles of his own not to wonder about the daydreams of nasty men. At the ferry, it was different. The biopharmaceutical staff was deft, impersonal, quick in removing his shackles. They took off all his prison clothes and left them on the liner. When he boarded the ferry, naked, they looked him over as if he were a rare plant or a body on the operating table. They were almost kind in the clinical deftness of their touch. They did not treat him as a criminal, but as a specimen. Men and women, clad in their medical smocks, they looked at him as though he were already dead. He tried to speak. A man older and more authoritative than the others said firmly and clearly, "Do not worry about talking. I will talk to you myself in a very little time. What we are having now are the preliminaries to determine your physical condition. Turn around, please." Mercer turned around. An orderly rubbed his back with a very strong antiseptic. "This is going to sting," said one of the technicians, "but it is nothing serious or painful. We're determining the toughness of the different layers of your skin." Mercer, annoyed by this impersonal approach, spoke up just as a sharp little sting burned him above the 6th lumbar vertebra. "Don't you know who I am?" "Of course we know who you are," said a woman's voice. "We have it all in a file in the corner. The chief doctor will talk about your crime later, if you want to talk about it. Keep quiet now. We are making a skin test, and you will feel much better if you do not make us prolong it." Honesty forced her to add another sentence. "And we will get better results as well." They had lost no time at all in getting to work. He peered at them sidewise to look at them. There was nothing about them to indicate that they were human devils in the antechambers of hell itself. Nothing was there to indicate that this was the satellite of Shayol, the final and uttermost place of chastisement and shame. They looked like medical people from his life before he committed the crime without a name. They changed from one routine to another. A woman wearing a surgical mask waved her hand at a white table. "Climb up on that, please." No one had said please to Mercer since the guards had seized him at the edge of the palace. He started to obey her, and then he saw that there were padded handcuffs at the head of the table. He stopped. "Get along, please," she demanded. 2 or 3 of the others turned around to look at both of them. The second please shook him. He had to speak. These were people, and he was a person again. He felt his voice rising, almost cracking into shrillness as he asked her, "Please, ma'am, is the punishment going to begin?" "There's no punishment here," said the woman. "This is the satellite. Get on the table. We're going to give you your first skin toughening before you talk to the head doctor. Then you can tell him all about your crime." "You know my crime?" he said, greeting it act almost like a neighbor. Of course not, said she. But all the people who come through here are believed to have committed crimes. Somebody thinks so, or they wouldn't be here. Most of them want to talk about their personal crimes. But don't slow me down. I'm a skin technician, and down on the surface of Shale, you're going to need the very best work that any of us can do for you. Now get on that table. And when you are ready to talk to the chief, you'll have something to talk about besides your crime. He complied. Another masked person, probably a girl, took his hands in cool, gentle fingers and fitted them to the padded cuffs in a way he had never sensed before. By now he thought he knew every interrogation machine in the whole empire, but this was nothing like any of them. The orderly stepped back. All clear, sir and doctor. Which do you prefer, said the skin technician. A great deal of pain or a couple of hours unconsciousness? Why should I want pain, said Mercer. Some specimens do, said the technician, by the time they arrive here. I suppose it depends on what people have done to them before they got here. I take it you did not get any of the dream punishments? No, said Mercer. I missed those. He thought to himself, I didn't know that I missed anything at all. He remembered his last trial, himself wired and plugged into the witness stand. The room had been high and dark. Bright blue light shone on the panel of judges, their judicial caps a fantastic parody of the Episcopal mitres of long, long ago. The judges were talking, but he could not hear them. Momentarily, the insulation slipped, and he heard one of them say, Look at that white, devilish face. A man like that is guilty of everything. I vote for Pain Terminal. Not Planet Shayol, said a second voice. The Dromazoa place, said a third voice. That should suit him, said the first voice. One of the judicial engineers must then have noticed that the prisoner was listening illegally. He was cut off. Mercer then thought that he had gone through everything which the cruelty and intelligence of mankind could devise. But this woman said he had missed the dream punishments. Could there be people in the universe even worse off than himself? There must be a lot of people down on Shale. They never came back. He was going to be one of them. Would they boast to him of what they had done before they were made to come to this place? You asked for it, said the woman technician. It is just an ordinary anesthetic. Don't panic when you awaken. Your skin is going to be thickened and strengthened chemically and biologically. Does it hurt? Of course, said she. But get this out of your head. We're not punishing you. The pain here is just ordinary medical pain. Anybody might get it if they needed a lot of surgery. The punishment, if that's what you want to call it, is down on Shale. Our only job is to make sure that you are fit to survive after you are landed. In a way, we are saving your life ahead of time. You can be grateful for that if you want to be.
That was dumb.
Meanwhile, you will save yourself a lot of trouble if you realize that your nerve endings will respond to the change in the skin. You had better expect to be very uncomfortable when you recover, but then we can help that too. She brought down an enormous lever, and Mercer blacked out. When he came to, he was in an ordinary hospital room, but he did not notice it. He seemed bedded in fire.
Oh, fuck you!
He lifted his hand to see if there were flames on it.
Yeah, well.
It looked the way it always had, except that it was a little red and a little swollen. He tried to turn in the bed. The fire became a scorching blast which stopped him in mid-turn. Uncontrollably, he moaned. A voice spoke. You are ready for some painkiller. It was a girl nurse. Hold your head still, she said, and I will give you half an amp of pleasure. Your skin won't bother you then. She slipped a soft cap on his head. It looked like metal, but it felt like silk. He had to dig his fingernails into his palms to keep from thrashing about on the bed. Scream if you want to, she said. A lot of them do. It will just be a minute or two before the cap finds the right lobe in your brain. She stepped to the corner and did something which he could not see. There was the flick of a switch. The fire did not vanish from his skin. He still felt it, but suddenly it did not matter. His mind was full of delicious pleasure which throbbed outward from his head and seemed to pulse down through his nerves. He had visited the pleasure palaces, but he had never felt anything like this before. He wanted to thank the girl, and he twisted around in the bed to see her. He could feel his whole body flash with pain as he did so, but the pain was far away, and the pulsating pleasure which coursed out of his head, down his spinal cord, and into his nerves was so intense that the pain got through only as a remote, unimportant signal. She was standing very still in the corner. "Thank you, nurse," said he. She said nothing. He looked more closely, though it was hard to look while enormous pleasure pulsed through his body like a symphony written in nerve messages. He focused his eyes on her and saw that she too wore a soft metallic cap. He pointed at it. She blushed all the way down to her throat. She spoke dreamily. "You looked like a nice man to me. I didn't think you'd tell on me." He gave her what he thought was a friendly smile, but with the pain in his skin and the pleasure bursting out of his head, he really had no idea of what his actual expression might be. "It's against the law," he said. "It's terribly against the law, but it is nice." "How do you think we stand
exactly what I wanted,
said the nurse. "You specimens come in here talking like ordinary people, and then you go down to Shale. Terrible things happen to you on Shale. Then the surface station sends up parts of you over and over again. I may see your head 10 times, quick frozen and ready for cutting up before my 2 years are up. You prisoners ought to know how we suffer," she crooned, the pleasure charge still keeping her relaxed and happy. "You ought to die as soon as you get down there, and not pester us with your torments. We can hear you screaming, you know. You keep on sounding like people even after Shale begins to work on you. Why do you do it, Mr. Specimen?" She giggled sillily. "You hurt our feelings so. No wonder a girl like me has to have a little jolt now and then. It's real dreamy, and I don't mind getting you ready to go down on Shayol." She staggered over to his bed. "Pull this cap off me, will you? I haven't got enough willpower left to raise my hands." Mercer saw his hand tremble as he reached for the cap.
Oh wait, no, it's bubbles.
His fingers touched the girl's soft hair through the cap. As he tried to get his thumb under the edge of the cap in order to pull it off, he realized this was the loveliest girl he had ever touched. He felt that he had always loved her, that he always would. Her cap came off. She stood erect, staggering a little before she found a chair to hold to. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. "Just a minute," she said in her normal voice. "I'll be with you in just a minute. The only time I can get a jolt of this is when one of you visitors gets a dose to get over the skin trouble." She turned to the room mirror to adjust her hair. Speaking with her back to him, she said, "I hope I didn't say anything about downstairs." Mercer still had the cap on. He loved this beautiful girl who had put it on him. He was ready to weep at the thought that she had had the same kind of pleasure which he still enjoyed. Not for the world would he say anything which could hurt her feelings. He was sure she wanted to be told that she had not said anything about downstairs, probably shop talk for the surface of Shale. So he assured her warmly, "You said nothing. Nothing at all." She came over to the bed, leaned, kissed him on the lips. The kiss was as far away as the pain. He felt nothing. The Niagara of throbbing pleasure which poured through his head left no room for more sensation. But he liked the friendliness of it. A grim, sane corner of his mind whispered to him that this was probably the last time he would ever kiss a woman. But it did not seem to matter. With skilled fingers, she adjusted the cap on his head. "There now. You're a sweet guy. I'm going to pretend, forget, and leave the cap on you till the doctor comes." With a bright smile, she squeezed his shoulder. She hastened out of the room. The white of her skirt flashed prettily as she went out the door. He saw that she had very shapely legs indeed. She was nice, but the cap, it was the cap that mattered. He closed his eyes and let the cap go on stimulating the pleasure centers of his brain. The pain in his skin was still there, but it did not matter any more than did the chair standing in the corner. The pain was just something that happened to be in the room. A firm touch on his arm made him open his eyes. The older, authoritative-looking man was standing beside the bed, looking down at him with a quizzical smile. "She did it again," said the old man. Mercer shook his head, trying to indicate that the young nurse had done nothing wrong. "I'm Dr. Vomacht," said the older man, "and I am going to take this cap off you. You will then experience the pain again, but I think it will not be so bad. You can have the cap several more times before you leave here." With a swift, firm gesture, he snatched the cap off Mercer's head. Mercer promptly doubled up with the inrush of fire from his skin. He started to scream, and then saw that Dr. Vomacht was watching him calmly. Mercer gasped. "It is easier now." "I knew it would be," said the doctor. "I had to take the cap off to talk to you. You have a few choices to make." "Yes, doctor," gasped Mercer. "You have committed a serious crime, and you are going down to the surface of Shayol." "Yes," said Mercer. "Do you want to tell me your crime?" Mercer thought of the white palace walls in perpetual sunlight and the soft mewing of the little things when he reached them. He tightened his arms, legs, back, and jaw. "No," he said. "I don't want to talk about it. It's the crime without a name, against the Imperial family."
Nope.
"Fine," said the doctor. "That's a healthy attitude. The crime is past, your future is ahead. Now I can destroy your mind before you go down, if you want me to." "That's against the law," said Mercer. Dr. Vomacht smiled warmly and confidently.
Ooh.
"Of course it is. A lot of things are against human law.
Oh, shit.
But there are laws of science, too. Your body down on Shale is going to serve science. It doesn't matter to me whether the body has Mercer's mind or the mind of a low-grade shellfish. I have to leave enough mind in you to keep the body going. But I can wipe out the historic you and give your body a better chance of being happy. It's your choice, Mercer. Do you want to be you or not?" Mercer shook his head back and forth. "I don't know." "I'm taking a chance," said Dr. Vomacht, "in giving you this much leeway. I'd have it done if I were in your position. It's pretty bad down there." Mercer looked at the full, broad face. He did not trust the comfortable smile. Perhaps this was a trick to increase his punishment. The cruelty of the Emperor was proverbial. Look at what he had done to the widow of his predecessor, the Dowager Lady Da. She was younger than the Emperor himself, and he had sent her to a place worse than death. If he had been sentenced to Shale, why was this doctor trying to interfere with the rules? Maybe the doctor himself had been conditioned and did not know what he was offering. Dr. Vomacht read Mercer's face. "All right, you refuse. You want to take your mind down with you. It's all right with me. I don't have you on my conscience. I suppose you'll refuse the next offer, too. Do you want me to take your eyes out before you go down? You'll be much more comfortable without vision. I know that from the voices that we record for the warning broadcasts. I can sear the optic nerves so that there will be no chance of your getting vision again." Mercer rocked back and forth. The fiery pain had become a universal itch, but the soreness of his spirit was greater than the discomfort of his skin. "You refuse that too," said the doctor. "I suppose so," said Mercer. "Then all I have to do is to get ready. You can have the cap for a while if you want." Mercer said, "Before I put the cap on, can you tell me what happens down there?" "Some of it," said the doctor. "There is an attendant. He is a man, but not a human being. He is a homunculus fashioned out of cattle material. He is intelligent and very conscientious. You specimens are turned loose on the surface of Shale. The dromazoa are a special life form there. When they settle in your body, Biticat, that's the attendant, carves them out with an anesthetic and sends them up here. We freeze the tissue cultures and they are compatible with almost any kind of oxygen-based life.
Nope.
Half the surgical repair you see in the whole universe comes out of buds that we ship
Jesus,
from here.
that was fast.
Shale is a very healthy place. So far as survival is concerned, you won't die. You mean, said Mercer, that I am getting perpetual punishment? I didn't say that, said Dr. Beaumont. Or if I did, I was wrong. You won't die soon. I don't know how long you will live down there. Remember, no matter how uncomfortable you get, the samples which Bedicat sends up will help thousands of people in all the inhabited worlds. Now take the cap. I'd rather talk, said Mercer. It may be my last chance. The doctor looked at him strangely. If you can stand that pain, go ahead and talk. Can I commit suicide down there? I don't know, said the doctor. It's never happened. And to judge by the voices, you'd think they wanted to. Has anybody ever come back from Shale? Not since it was put off limits about 400 years ago. Can I talk to other people down there? Yes, said the doctor. Who punishes me down there? Nobody does, you fool, cried Dr. Beaumont. It's not punishment. People don't like it down on Shayol, and it's better, I guess, to get convicts instead of volunteers. But there isn't anybody against you at all. No jailers? Asked Mercer, with a whine in his voice. No jailers, no rules, no prohibitions. Just Shayol and Bedicat to take care of you. Do you still want your mind and your eyes? I'll keep them, said Mercer.
Wrong one.
I've gone this far, and I might as well go the rest of the way. Then let me put the cap on you for your second dose, said Dr. Beaumont. The doctor adjusted the cap just as lightly and delicately as had the nurse. He was quicker about it. There was no sign of his picking out another cap for himself. The inrush of pleasure was like a wild intoxication. His burning skin receded into distance. The doctor was near in space, but even the doctor did not matter. Mercer was not afraid of Shale. The pulsation of happiness out of his brain was too great to leave room for fear or pain. Dr. Beaumont was holding out his hand. Mercer wondered why, and then realized that the wonderful, kindly, cap-giving man was offering to shake hands. He lifted his own. It was heavy, but his arm was happy too. They shook hands. It was curious, thought Mercer, to feel the handshake beyond the double level of cerebral pleasure and dermal pain. Goodbye, Mr. Mercer, said the doctor. Goodbye, and a good night.
I'm just going to focus on Desecration 1.
2. The ferry satellite was a hospitable place. The hundreds of hours that followed were like a long, weird dream. Twice again, the young nurse sneaked into his bedroom with him when he was being given the cap, and had a cap with him. There were baths which calloused his whole body. Under strong local anesthetics, his teeth were taken out and stainless steel took their place. There were irradiations under blazing lights which took away the pain of his skin. There were special treatments for his fingernails and toenails. Gradually, they changed into formidable claws. He found himself stropping them on the aluminum bed one night and saw that they left deep marks. His mind never became completely clear. Sometimes he thought he was home with his mother, that he was little again and in pain. Other times, under the cap, he laughed in his bed to think that people were sent to this place for punishment, when it was all so terribly much fun. There were no trials, no questions, no judges. Food was good, but he did not think about it much. The cap was better. Even when he was awake, he was drowsy. At last, with the cap on him, they put him into an adiabatic pod, a one-body missile which could be dropped from the ferry to the planet below. He was all closed in, except for his face. Dr. Beaumont seemed to swim into the room. "You are strong, Mercer," the doctor shouted. "You are very strong. Can you hear me?" Mercer nodded. "We wish you well, Mercer. No matter what happens, remember, you are helping other people up here." "Can I take the cap with me?" said Mercer. For an answer, Dr. Beaumont removed the cap himself. Two men closed the lid of the pod, leaving Mercer in total darkness. His mind started to clear, and he panicked against his wrappings. There was the roar of thunder and the taste of blood. The next thing that Mercer knew, he was in a cool, cool room, much chillier than the bedrooms and operating rooms of the satellite. Someone was lifting him gently onto a table. he opened his eyes. An enormous face, 4 times the size of any human face Mercer had ever seen, was looking down at him. Huge brown eyes, cow-like in their gentle inoffensiveness, moved back and forth as the big face examined Mercer's wrappings. The face was that of a handsome man of middle years, clean-shaven, hair chestnut brown, with sensual full lips and gigantic but healthy yellow teeth exposed in a half-smile. The face saw Mercer's eyes open and spoke with a deep, friendly roar. "I'm your best friend. My name is Bidicat, but you don't have to use that here. Just call me friend, and I will always help you." "I hurt," said Mercer. "Of course you do. You hurt all over. That's a big drop,"
Jesus.
said Bidicat. "Can I have a cap, please?"
Like plague, but
begged Mercer. It was
this
not
is
a
good
question.
fucking thing.
It was a demand. Mercer felt that his private inward eternity depended on it.
Let's try it.
Bidicat laughed. "I haven't any caps down here. I might use them myself, or so they think. I have other things much better. No fear, fellow, I'll fix you up." Mercer looked doubtful. If the cap had brought him happiness on the ferry, it would take at least electrical stimulation of the brain to undo whatever torments the surface of Shale had to offer. Bidicat's laughter filled the room like a bursting pillow. "Have you ever heard of condamine?" "No," said Mercer. "It's a narcotic so powerful that the pharmacopoeias are not allowed to mention it." "You have that?" said Mercer hopefully. "Something better. I have super condamine. It's named after the new French town where they developed it. The chemists hooked in one more hydrogen molecule. That gave it a real jolt. If you took it in your present shape, you'd be dead in 3 minutes. But those 3 minutes would seem like 10,000 years of happiness to the inside of your mind." Bidicat rolled his brown cow eyes expressively and smacked his rich red lips with a tongue of enormous extent. "What's the use of it then?" "You can take it," said Bidicat. "You can take it after you have been exposed to the dromazoa outside this cabin. You get all the good effects and none of the bad. You want to see something?" What answer is there except yes, thought Mercer grimly. Does he think I have an urgent invitation to a tea party? "Look out the window," said Bidicat, "and tell me what you see." The atmosphere was clear. The surface was like a desert, ginger yellow with streaks of green, where lichen and low shrubs grew, obviously stunted and tormented by high, dry winds. The landscape was monotonous. 200 or 300 yards away, there was a herd of bright pink objects, which seemed alive, but Mercer could not see them well enough to describe them clearly. Further away, on the extreme right of his frame of vision, there was the statue of an enormous human foot, the height of a 6-story building. Mercer could not see what the foot was connected to. "I see a big foot," said he, but what?" said Bidicat, like an enormous child hiding the denouement of a hugely private joke. Large as he was, he would have been dwarfed by any one of the toes on that tremendous foot. "But it can't be a real foot," said Mercer. "It is," said Bidicat. "That's Go Captain Alvarez, the man who found this planet. After 600 years, he's still in fine shape. Of course, he's mostly dromazoitic by now, but I think there is some human consciousness inside him. You know what I do?" "What?" said Mercer. "I give him 6 cubic centimeters of super condamine and he snorts for me. Real happy little snorts. A stranger might think it was a volcano. That's what super condamine can do, and you're going to get plenty of it. You're a lucky man, Mercer. You have me for a friend, and you have my needle for a treat. I do all the work, and you get all the fun. Isn't that a nice surprise?" Mercer thought, "You're lying. Lying. Where do the screams come from that we have all heard broadcast as a warning on Punishment Day? Why did the doctor offer to cancel my brain, or to take out my eyes?" The cowman watched him sadly, a hurt expression on his face. "You don't believe me," he said, very sadly. "It's not quite that," said Mercer, with an attempt at heartiness, "but
Yeah.
I think you're leaving something out." "Nothing much," said Bidicat. "You jump when the dromazoa hits you. You'll be upset when you start growing new parts. Heads, kidneys, hands. I had one fellow in here who grew 38 hands in a single session outside. I took them all off, froze them, and sent them upstairs. I take good care of everybody. You'll probably yell for a while, but remember, just call me friend. And I have the nicest treat in the universe waiting for you. Now, would you like some fried eggs? I don't eat eggs myself, but most true men like them. Eggs, said Mercer. What have eggs got to do with it? Nothing much. It's just a treat for you people. Get something in your stomach before you go outside. You'll get through the first day better. Mercer, unbelieving, watched as the big man took 2 precious eggs from a cold chest, expertly broke them into a little pan, and put the pan in the heat field at the center of the table Mercer had awakened on. Friend, eh? Biddigat grinned. You'll see I'm a good friend. When you go outside, remember that. An hour later, Mercer did go outside. Strangely at peace with himself, he stood at the door. Biddigat pushed him in a brotherly way, giving him a shove which was gentle enough to be an encouragement. Don't make me put on my lead suit, fellow. Mercer had seen a suit fully the size of an ordinary spaceship cabin hanging on the wall of an adjacent room. When I close this door, the outer one will open. Just walk on out. But what will happen? Said Mercer, the fear turning around in his stomach and making little grabs at his throat from the inside. Don't start that again, said Biddigat. For an hour he had fended off Mercer's questions about the outside. A map? Biddigat had laughed at the thought. Food? He said not to worry. Other people? They'd be there. Weapons? What for? Biddigat had replied. Over and over again, Biddigat had insisted that he was Mercer's friend. What would happen to Mercer? The same that happened to everybody else. Mercer stepped out. Nothing happened. The day was cool. The wind moved gently against his toughened skin. Mercer looked around apprehensively. The mountainous body of Captain Alvarez occupied a good part of the landscape to the right. Mercer had no wish to get mixed up with that. He glanced back at the cabin. Biddigat was not looking out the window. Mercer walked slowly, straight ahead. There was a flash on the ground, no brighter than the glitter of sunlight on a fragment of glass. Mercer felt a sting in the thigh, as though a sharp instrument had touched him lightly. He brushed the place with his hand. It was as though the sky fell in. A pain. It was more than a pain, it was a living throb. Ran from his hip to his foot on the right side. The throb reached up to his chest, robbing him of breath. He fell and the ground hurt him. Nothing in the hospital satellite had been like this. He lay in the open air, trying not to breathe, but he did breathe anyhow. Each time he breathed, the throb moved with his thorax. He lay on his back, looking at the sun. At last he noticed that the sun was violet white. It was no use even thinking of calling. He had no voice. Tendrils of discomfort twisted within him. Since he could not stop breathing, he concentrated on taking air in the way that hurt him least. Gasps were too much work. Little tiny sips of air hurt him least. The desert around him was empty. He could not turn his head to look at the cabin. Is this it? He thought. Is an eternity of this the punishment of Shayol? There were voices near him. 2 faces, grotesquely pink, looked down at him. They might have been human. The man looked normal enough, except for having 2 noses side by side. The woman was a caricature beyond belief. She had grown a breast on each cheek, and a cluster of naked baby-like fingers hung limp from her forehead. It's a beauty, said the woman. A new one. Come along, said the man. They lifted him to his feet. He did not have strength enough to resist. When he tried to speak to them, a harsh cawing sound, like the cry of an ugly bird, came from his mouth. They moved with him efficiently. He saw that he was being dragged to the herd of pink things. As they approached, he saw that they were people. Better, he saw that they had once been people. A man with the beak of a flamingo was picking at his own body. A woman lay on the ground. She had a single head, but beside what seemed to be her original body, she had a boy's naked body growing sidewise from her neck. The boy body, clean, new, paralytically helpless, made no movement other than shallow breathing.
Okay, cool.
Mercer looked around. The only one of the group who was wearing clothing was a man with his overcoat on sidewise. Mercer stared at him, finally realizing that the man had 2, or was it 3, stomachs growing on the outside of his abdomen. The coat held them in place. The transparent peritoneal wall looked fragile. "New one," said his female captor. She and the 2-nosed man put him down. The group lay scattered on the ground. Mercer lay in a state of stupor among them. An old man's voice said, "I'm afraid they're going to feed us pretty soon." "Oh, no, it's too early. Not again." Protests echoed from the group. The old man's voice went on. "Look, near the big toe of the mountain." The desolate murmur in the group attested their confirmation of what he had seen. Mercer tried to ask what it was all about, but produced only a caw. A woman, was it a woman? Crawled over to him on her hands and knees. Besides her ordinary hands, she was covered with hands all over her trunk and halfway down her thighs. Some of the hands looked old and withered. Others were as fresh and pink as the baby fingers on his captress's face. The woman shouted at him, though it was not necessary to shout. "The Dromazoa are coming! This time it hurts. When you get used to the place, you can dig in." She waved at a group of mounds which surrounded the herd of people. "They're dug in," she said.
Nope.
Mercer cawed again. "Don't you worry," said the hand-covered woman, and gasped as a flash of light touched her. The lights reached Mercer, too. The pain was like the first contact, but more probing. Mercer felt his eyes widen as odd sensations within his body led to an inescapable conclusion. These lights, these things, these whatever they were feeding him and building him up. Their intelligence, if they had it, was not human, but their motives were clear. In between the stabs of pain, he felt them fill his stomach, put water in his blood, draw water from his kidneys and bladder, massage his heart, move his lungs for him. Every single thing they did was well-meant and beneficent in intent. And every single action hurt. Abruptly, like the lifting of a cloud of insects, they were gone. Mercer was aware of a noise somewhere outside, a brainless, bawling cascade of ugly noise. He started to look around, and the noise stopped. It had been himself screaming the ugly screams of a psychotic, a terrified drunk, an animal driven out of understanding or reason. When he stopped, he found he had his speaking voice again. A man came to him, naked like the others. There was a spike sticking through his head. The skin had healed around it on both sides. "Hello, fellow," said the man with the spike. "Hello," said Mercer. It was a foolishly commonplace thing to say in a place like this. "You can't kill yourself," said the man with the spike through his head. "Yes, you can," said the woman covered with hands. Mercer found that his first pain had disappeared. "What's happening to me?" "You got a part," said the man with the spike. "They're always putting parts on us. After a while, Bedikat comes and cuts most of them off, except for the ones that ought to grow a little more. Like her," he added, nodding at the woman who lay with the boy body growing from her neck. "And that's all?" said Mercer. "The stabs for the new parts and the stinging for the feeding?" "No," said the man. "Sometimes they think we're too cold and they fill our insides with fire, or they think we're too hot and they freeze us, nerve by nerve." The woman with the boy body called over. "And sometimes they think we're unhappy, so they try to force us to be happy. I think that's the worst of all." Mercer stammered. "Are you people... are you the only herd?" The man with the spike coughed instead of laughing. "Herd, that's funny. The land is full of people. Most of them dig in. We're the ones who can still talk. We stay together for company. We get more turns with Bedikat that way." Mercer started to ask another question, but he felt the strength run out of him. The day had been too much. The ground rocked like a ship on water. The sky turned black. He felt someone catch him as he fell. He felt himself being stretched out on the ground. And then, mercifully and magically, he slept. 3. Within a week, he came to know the group well. They were an absent-minded bunch of people. Not one of them ever knew when a dromazoan might flash by and add another part. Mercer was not stung again, but the incision he had obtained just outside the cabin was hardening. Spikehead looked at it when Mercer modestly undid his belt and lowered the edge of his trouser top so they could see the wound. "You've got a head," he said. "A whole baby head. They'll be glad to get that one upstairs when Bidikat cuts it off you." The group even tried to arrange his social life. They introduced him to the girl of the herd. She had grown one body after another, pelvis turning into shoulders, and the pelvis below that turning into shoulders again, until she was 5 people long. Her face was unmarred. She tried to be friendly to Mercer. He was so shocked by her that he dug himself into the soft, dry, crumbly earth and stayed there for what seemed like 100 years. He found later that it was less than a full day. When he came out, the long, many-bodied girl was waiting for him. "You didn't have to come out just for me," said she. Mercer shook the dirt off himself. He looked around. The violet sun was going down and the sky was streaked with blues, deeper blues, and trails of orange sunset. He looked back at her. "I didn't get up for you. It's no use lying there waiting for the next time." "I want to show you something," she said. She pointed to a low hummock. "Dig that up." Mercer looked at her. She seemed friendly. He shrugged and attacked the soil with his powerful claws. With tough skin and heavy digging nails on the ends of his fingers, he found it was easy to dig like a dog. The earth cascaded beneath his busy hands. Something pink appeared down in the hole he had dug. He proceeded more carefully. He knew what it would be. It was. It was a man sleeping. Extra arms grew down one side of his body in an orderly series. The other side looked normal. Mercer turned back to the many-bodied girl who had writhed closer. "That's what I think it is, isn't it?" "Yes," she said. "Dr. Volmont burned his brain out for him, and took his eyes out, too." Mercer sat back on the ground and looked at the girl. "You told me to do it. Now tell me what for. To let you see? To let you know? To let you think?" "That's all," said Mercer. The girl twisted with startling suddenness. All the way down her series of bodies, her chests heaved. Mercer wondered how the air got into all of them. He did not feel sorry for her. He did not feel sorry for anyone except himself. When the spasm passed, the girl smiled at him apologetically. "They just gave me a new plant."
This should be interesting.
Mercer nodded grimly. "What now? A hand? It seems you have enough."
Ooh, fuck.
"Oh, those," she said, looking back at her many torsos. "I promised Bidikat that I'd let them grow. He's good. But that man, stranger. Look at that man you dug up. Who's better off, he or we?" Mercer stared at her. "Is that what you had me dig him up for?"
Whoa.
"Yes,"
This is
said
fucking
the girl.
great against bosses.
"Do you expect me to answer?" "No," said the girl. "Not now." "Who are you?" said Mercer. "We never ask that here. It doesn't matter. But since you're new, I'll tell you. I used to be the Lady Da, the Emperor's stepmother." "You?" he exclaimed. She smiled ruefully. "You're still so fresh you think it matters. But I have something more important to tell you." She stopped and bit her lip. "What?" he urged. "Better tell me before I get another bite. I won't be able to think or talk then, not for a long time. Tell me now." She brought her face close to his. It was still a lovely face, even in the dying orange of this violet-sunned sunset. "People never live forever." "Yes," said Mercer. "I knew that." "Believe it," ordered the Lady Da. Lights flashed across the dark plain, still in the distance. Said she, Dig in for the night. They may miss you." Mercer started digging. He glanced over at the man he had dug up. The brainless body with motions as soft as those of a starfish underwater was pushing its way back into the earth. 5 or 7 days later, there was a shouting through the herd. Mercer had come to know a half-man, the lower part of whose body was gone and whose viscera were kept in place with what resembled a translucent plastic bandage. The half-man had shown him how to lie still when the Dromazoa came with their inescapable errands of doing good. Said the half-man, "You can't fight them. They made Alvarez as big as a mountain so that he never stirs. Now they're trying to make us happy. They feed us and clean us and sweeten us up. Lie still. Don't worry about screaming. We all do." "When do we get the drug?" said Mercer. "When Bedicat comes." Bedicat came that day, pushing a sort of wheeled sled ahead of him. The runners carried it over the hillocks, the wheels worked on the surface. Even before he arrived, the herd sprang into furious action. Everywhere, people were digging up the sleepers. By the time Bedicat reached their waiting place, the herd must have uncovered twice their own number of sleeping pink bodies, men and women, young and old. The sleepers looked no better and no worse than the waking ones. "Hurry," said the Lady Da. "He never gives any of us a shot until we're all ready." Bedicat wore his heavy lead suit. He lifted an arm in friendly greeting, like a father returning home with treats for his children. The herd clustered around him, but did not crowd him. He reached into the sled. There was a harnessed bottle which he threw over his shoulders. He snapped the locks on the straps. From the bottle there hung a tube. Midway down the tube there was a small pressure pump. At the end of the tube there was a glistening hypodermic needle. When ready, Bedicat gestured for them to come closer. They approached him with radiant happiness. He stepped through their ranks and past them to the girl who had the boy growing from her neck. His mechanical voice boomed through the loudspeaker set in the top of his suit. "Good girl, good girl. You get a big present." He thrust the hypodermic into her so long that Mercer could see an air bubble travel from the pump up to the bottle. Then he moved back to the others, booming a word now and then, moving with improbable grace and speed amid the people. His needle flashed as he gave them hypodermics under pressure. The people dropped to sitting positions or lay down on the ground as though half asleep. He knew Mercer. "Hello, fellow. Now you can have the fun. It would have killed you in the cabin. Do you have anything for me?" Mercer stammered, not knowing what Bedicat meant, and the two-nosed man answered for him. "I think he has a nice baby head, but it isn't big enough for you to take yet."
I'll keep this.
Mercer never noticed the needle touch his arm. Bedicat had turned to the next knot of people when the supercondomine hit Mercer. He tried to run after Bedicat to hug the lead spacesuit, to tell Bedicat that he loved him. He stumbled and fell, but it did not hurt. The many-bodied girl lay near him. Mercer spoke to her.
Yep.
"Isn't it wonderful? You're beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I'm so happy to be here." The woman covered with growing hands came and sat beside them. She radiated warmth and good fellowship. Mercer thought that she looked very distinguished and charming. He struggled out of his clothes. It was foolish and snobbish to wear clothing when none of these nice people did. The two women babbled and crooned at him. With one corner of his mind, he knew that they were saying nothing, just expressing the euphoria of a drug so powerful that the known universe had forbidden it. With most of his mind, he was happy.
Actually,
he wondered how anyone could have the good luck to visit a planet as nice as this. He tried to tell the Lady Da, but the words weren't quite straight. A painful stab hit him in the abdomen. The drug went after the pain and swallowed it. It was like the cap in the hospital, only 1,000 times better. The pain was gone, though it had been crippling the first time. He forced himself to be deliberate. He rammed his mind into focus and said to the two ladies who lay pinkly nude beside him in the desert, "That was a good bite. Maybe I will grow another head. That would make Bedicat happy." The Lady Da forced the foremost of her bodies into an upright position. Said she, "I'm strong too. I can talk. Remember, man, remember, people never live forever. We can die too. We can die like real people. I do so believe in death. Mercer smiled at her through his happiness. Of course you can. But isn't this nice? With this, he felt his lips thicken and his mind go slack. He was wide awake, but he did not feel like doing anything. In that beautiful place, among all those companionable and attractive people, he sat and smiled. Bidicat was sterilizing his knives. Mercer wondered how long the supercondomine had lasted him. He endured the ministrations of the Dromazoa without screams or movement. The agonies of nerves and itching of skin were phenomena which happened somewhere near him but meant nothing. He watched his own body with remote, casual interest. The Lady Da and the hand-covered woman stayed near him. After a long time, the half-man dragged himself over to the group with his powerful arms. Having arrived, he blinked sleepily and friendlily at them, and lapsed back into the restful stupor from which he had emerged. Mercer saw the sun rise on occasion, closed his eyes briefly, and opened them to see stars shining. Time had no meaning. The Dromazoa fed him in their mysterious way. The drug canceled out his needs for cycles of the body. Last, he noticed a return of the inwardness of pain. The pains themselves had not changed. He had. He knew all the events which could take place on Shale. He remembered them well from his happy period. Formerly, he had noticed them. Now, he felt them. He tried to ask the Lady Da how long they had had the drug, and how much longer they would have to wait before they had it again.
Jesus.
She smiled at him with benign, remote happiness. Apparently, her many torsos, stretched out along the ground, had a greater capacity for retaining the drug than did his body. She meant him well, but was in no condition for articulate speech. The half-man lay on the ground, arteries pulsating prettily behind the half-transparent film, which protected his abdominal cavity. Mercer squeezed the man's shoulder. The half-man woke, recognized Mercer, and gave him a healthily sleepy grin. A good morrow to you, my boy. That's out of a play. Did you ever see a play? You mean a game with cards? No, said the half-man. A sort of eye machine with real people doing the figures. I never saw that, said Mercer. But you want to ask me when Bidicat is going to come back with the needle? Yes, said Mercer, a little ashamed of his obviousness. Soon, said the half-man. That's why I think of plays. We all know what is going to happen. We all know when it is going to happen. We all know what the dummies will do. He gestured at the hummocks in which the decorticated men were cradled. And we all know what the new people will ask. But we never know how long a scene is going to take. What's a scene? Asked Mercer. Is that the name for the needle? The half-man laughed with something close to real humor. No. You've got the lovelies on the brain. A scene is just part of a play. I mean, we know the order in which things happen, but we have no clocks, and nobody cares enough to count days or to make calendars, and there's not much climate here, so none of us know how long anything takes. The pain seems short and the pleasure seems long. I'm inclined to think that they are about 2 Earth weeks each. Mercer did not know what an Earth week was, since he had not been a well-read man before his conviction. But he got nothing more from the half-man at that time. The half-man received a dromozoitic implant, turned red in the face, shouted senselessly at Mercer, "Take it out, you fool! Take it out of me!" While Mercer looked on helplessly, the half-man twisted over on his side. His pink, dusty back turned to Mercer and wept hoarsely and quietly to himself. Mercer himself could not tell how long it was before Bidicat came back. It might have been several days. It might have been several months. Once again, Bidicat moved among them like a father. Once again, they clustered like children. This time, Bidicat smiled pleasantly at the little head which had grown out of Mercer's thigh. A sleeping child's head, covered with light hair on top, and with dainty eyebrows over the resting eyes. Mercer got the blissful needle. When Bidicat cut the head from Mercer's thigh, he felt the knife grinding against the cartilage which held the head to his own body. He saw the child face grimace as the head was cut. He felt the far, cool unimportant pain as Bedicat dabbed the wound with a corrosive antiseptic, which stopped all bleeding immediately. The next time it was 2 legs growing from his chest. Then there had been another head beside his own. Or was that after the torso and legs, waist to toe tips, of the little girl which had grown from his side? He forgot the order. He did not count time.
Nice.
Lady Da smiled at him often, but there was no love in this place. She had lost the extra torsos. In between teratologies, she was a pretty and shapely woman. But the nicest thing about their relationship was her whisper to him, repeated some thousands of times, repeated with smiles and hope. People never live forever. She found this immensely comforting, even though Mercer did not make much sense out of it. Thus, events occurred and victims changed in appearance, and new ones arrived. Sometimes Bedicat took the new ones, resting in the everlasting sleep of their burned-out brains, in a ground truck to be added to other herds. The bodies in the truck threshed and bawled without human speech when the Dromazoa struck them. Finally, Mercer did manage to follow Bedicat to the door of the cabin. He had to fight the bliss of supercondomine to do it. Only the memory of previous hurt, bewilderment, and perplexity made him sure that if he did not ask Bedicat when he, Mercer, was happy, the answer would no longer be available when he needed it. Fighting pleasure itself, he begged Bedicat to check the records and to tell him how long he had been there. Bedicat grudgingly agreed, but he did not come out of the doorway. He spoke through the public address box built into the cabin, and his gigantic voice roared out over the empty plain, so that the pink herd of talking people stirred gently in their happiness and wondered what their friend Bedicat might be wanting to tell them. When he said it, they thought it exceedingly profound, though none of them understood it, since it was simply the amount of time that Mercer had been on Shale. Standard years, 84 years, 7 months, 3 days, 2 hours, 11 and 1/2 minutes. Good luck, fellow. Mercer turned away. The secret little corner of his mind, which stayed sane through happiness and pain, made him wonder about Bedicat. What persuaded the cowman to remain on Shale? What kept him happy without supercondomine? Was Bedicat a crazy slave to his own duty? Or was he a man who had hopes of going back to his own planet someday, surrounded by a family of little cow people resembling himself? Mercer, despite his happiness, wept a little at the strange fate of Bedicat. His own fate he accepted. He remembered the last time he had eaten. Actual eggs from an actual pan. The Dromazoa kept him alive, but he did not know how they did it. He staggered back to the group. The Lady Da, naked in the dusty plain, waved a hospitable hand and showed that there was a place for him to sit beside her. There were unclaimed square miles of seating space around them, but he appreciated the kindliness of her gesture nonetheless. 4. The years, if they were years, went by. The land of Shale did not change. Sometimes the bubbling sound of geysers came faintly across the plain to the herd of men. Those who could talk declared it to be the breathing of Captain Alvarez. There was night and day, but no setting of crops, no change of season, no generations of men. Time stood still for these people, and their load of pleasure was so commingled with the shocks and pains of the Dromazoa that the words of the Lady Da took on very remote meaning. People never live forever. Her statement was a hope, not a truth in which they could believe. They did not have the wit to follow the stars in their courses, to exchange names with each other, to harvest the experience of each for the wisdom of all. There was no dream of escape for these people. Though they saw the old-style chemical rockets lift up from the field beyond Bedicat's cabin, they did not make plans to hide among the frozen crop of transmuted flesh. Far long ago, some other prisoner than one of these had tried to write a letter.
This should be interesting.
His handwriting was on a rock. Mercer read it, and so had a few of the others, but they could not tell which man had done it, nor did they care. The letter, scraped on stone, had been a message home. They could still read the opening. Once I was like you, stepping out of my window at the end of day, and letting the winds blow me gently toward the place I lived in. Once, like you, I had one head, 2 hands, 10 fingers on my hands. The front part of my head was called a face, and I could talk with it. Now I can only write, and that only when I get out of pain. Once, like you, I ate foods, drank liquid, had a name. I cannot remember the name I had. You can stand up, you who get this letter. I cannot even stand up. I just wait for the light to put my food in me, molecule by molecule, and to take it out again. Don't think that I am punished anymore. This place is not a punishment. It is something else. Among the pink herd, none of them ever decided what was something else. Curiosity had died among them long ago. Then came the day of the little people. It was a time, not an hour, not a year, a duration somewhere between them, when the Lady Da and Mercer sat wordless with happiness and filled with the joy of supercondomine. They had nothing to say to one another. The drug said all things for them.
That was fun.
A disagreeable roar from Bidikat's cabin made them stir mildly. Those two and 1 or 2 others looked toward the speaker of the public address system. The Lady Da brought herself to speak, though the matter was unimportant beyond words. "I do believe," said she, "that we used to call that the war alarm." They drowsed back into their happiness. A man with 2 rudimentary heads growing beside his own crawled over to them. All 3 heads looked very happy, and Mercer thought it delightful of him to appear in such a whimsical shape. Under the pulsing glow of supercondomine, Mercer regretted that he had not used times when his mind was clear to ask him who he had once been. He answered it for them. Forcing his eyelids open by sheer willpower, he gave the Lady Da and Mercer the lazy ghost of a military salute and said, "Suzdal, ma'am and sir, former cruiser commander. They are sounding the alert. Wish to report that I am not quite ready for battle." He dropped off to sleep. The gentle peremptorynesses of the Lady Da brought his eyes open again. "Commander, why are they sounding it here? Why did you come to us?" "You, ma'am, and the gentleman with the ears seem to think best of our group. I thought you might have orders." Mercer looked around for the gentleman with the ears. It was himself. In that time, his face was almost wholly obscured with a crop of fresh little ears, but he paid no attention to them, other than expecting that Bidikat would cut them all off in due course, and that the Dromazoa would give him something else. The noise from the cabin rose to a higher, ear-splitting intensity. Among the herd, many people stirred. Some opened their eyes, looked around, murmured, "It's a noise," and went back to the happy drowsing with supercondomine. The cabin door opened. Bidikat rushed out without his suit. They had never seen him on the outside without his protective metal suit. He rushed up to them, looked wildly around, recognized the Lady Da and Mercer, picked them up, one under each arm, and raced with them back to the cabin. He flung them into the double door. They landed with bone-splitting crashes and found it amusing to hit the ground so hard. The floor tilted them into the room. Moments later, Bidikat followed. He roared at them. "Your people, or you were. You understand people. I only obey them, but this I will not obey. Look at that!" 4 beautiful human children lay on the floor. The 2 smallest seemed to be twins, about 2 years of age. There was a girl of 5 and a boy of 7 or so. All of them had slack eyelids. All of them had thin red lines around their temples, and their hair, shaved away, showed how their brains had been removed. Bidikat, heedless of danger from Dromazoa, stood beside the Lady Da and Mercer shouting, "You're real people! I'm just a cow! I do my duty! My duty does not include this! These are children!" The wise, surviving recess of Mercer's mind registered shock and disbelief. It was hard to sustain the emotion, because the supercondomine washed at his consciousness like a great tide, making everything seem lovely. The forefront of his mind, rich with the drug, told him, "Won't it be nice to have some children with us?" But the undestroyed interior of his mind, keeping the honor he knew before he came to Shale, whispered, "This is a crime worse than any crime we have committed, and the Empire has done it." "What have you done?" said the Lady Da. "What can we do?" "I tried to call the satellite. When they knew what I was talking about, they cut me off. After all, I'm not people. The head doctor told me to do my work." "Was it Dr. Vomacht?" Mercer asked. "Vomacht?" said Bedicat. "He died 100 years ago, of old age. No, a new doctor cut me off. I don't have people feeling, but I am Earth-born, of Earth blood. I have emotions myself, pure cattle emotions. This I cannot permit." "What have you done?" Bedicat lifted his eyes to the window. His face was illuminated by a determination which, even beyond the edges of the drug which made them love him, made him seem like the father of this world, responsible, honorable, unselfish.
Okay.
He smiled. "They will kill me for it, I think, but I have put in the galactic alert. All ships here." The Lady Da, sitting back on the floor, declared, "But that's only for new invaders. It is a false alarm." She pulled herself together and rose to her feet. "Can you cut these things off me right now in case people come? And get me a dress? And do you have anything which will counteract the effect of the supercondomine?" "That's what I wanted," cried Bedicat. "I will not take these children. You give me leadership." There and then, on the floor of the cabin, he trimmed her down to the normal proportions of mankind. The corrosive antiseptic rose like smoke in the air of the cabin. Mercer thought it all very dramatic and pleasant, and dropped off in catnaps part of the time. Then he felt Bedicat trimming him, too. Bedicat opened a long drawer and put the specimens in. From the cold in the room, it must have been a refrigerated locker. He set them both up against the wall. "I've been thinking," he said. "There is no antidote for supercondomine. Who would want one? But I can give you the hypos from my rescue boat. They are supposed to bring a person back no matter what has happened to that person out in space." There was a whining over the cabin roof. Bedicat knocked a window out with his fist, stuck his head out of the window and looked up. "Come on in," he shouted. There was the thud of a landing craft touching ground quickly. Doors whirred. Mercer wondered mildly why people dared to land on Shale. When they came in, he saw that they were not people. They were customs robots who could travel at velocities which people could never match. One wore the insignia of an inspector. "Where are the invaders?" "There are no," began Bedicat. The Lady Da, imperial in her posture though she was completely nude, said in a voice of complete clarity, "I am a former empress, the Lady Da. Do you know me?" "No, ma'am," said the robot inspector. He looked as uncomfortable as a robot could look. The drug made Mercer think that it would be nice to have robots for company, out on the surface of Shale. "I declare this top emergency, in the ancient words. Do you understand? Connect me with the instrumentality." "We can't," said the inspector. "You can ask," said the Lady Da. The inspector complied. The Lady Da turned to Bedicat. "Give Mercer and me those shots now. Then put us outside the door so the Dromazoa can repair these scars. Bring us in as soon as a connection is made. Wrap us in cloth if you do not have clothes for us. Mercer can stand the pain." "Yes," said Bedicat, keeping his eyes away from the four soft children and their collapsed eyes. The injection burned like no fire ever had. It must have been capable of fighting the supercondomine because Bedicat put them through the open window so as to save time going through the door. The Dromazoa, sensing that they needed repair, flashed upon them. This time the supercondomine had something else fighting it. Mercer did not scream, but he lay against the wall and wept for 10,000 years. In objective time, it must have been several hours. The customs robots were taking pictures. The Dromazoa were flashing against them, too, sometimes in whole swarms, but nothing happened. Mercer heard the voice of the communicator inside the cabin calling loudly for Bedicat. "Surgery satellite calling Shale. Bedicat, get on the line." He obviously was not replying. There were soft cries coming from the other communicator, the one which the customs officials had brought into the room. Mercer was sure that the eye machine was on, and that people in other worlds were looking at Shale for the first time. Bidicat came through the door. He had torn navigation charts out of his lifeboat. With these, he cloaked them. Mercer noted that the Lady Da changed the arrangement of the cloak in a few minor ways, and suddenly looked like a person of great importance. They re-entered the cabin door. Bidicat whispered, as if filled with awe. The instrumentality has been reached, and the Lord of the Instrumentality is about to talk to you. There was nothing for Mercer to do, so he sat back in a corner of the room and watched. The Lady Da, her skin healed, stood pale and nervous in the middle of the floor. The room filled with an odorless, intangible smoke. The smoke clouded. The full communicator was on. A human figure appeared. A woman dressed in a uniform of radically conservative cut faced the Lady Da. "This is Shayol. You are the Lady Da. You called me." The Lady Da pointed to the children on the floor. "This must not happen," she said. "This is a place of punishments, agreed upon between the Instrumentality and the Empire. No one said anything about children." The woman on the screen looked down at the children. "This is the work of insane people," she cried. She looked accusingly at the Lady Da. "Are you Imperial?" "I was an Empress, madam," said the Lady Da. "And you permit this?" "Permit it?" cried the Lady Da. "I had nothing to do with it." Her eyes widened. "I am a prisoner here myself. Don't you understand?" The image woman snapped. "No, I don't." "I," said the Lady Da, "am a specimen. Look at the herd out there. I came from them a few hours ago." "Adjust me," said the image woman to Bidicat. "Let me see that herd." Her body, standing upright, soared through the wall in a flashing arc, and was placed in the very center of the herd. The Lady Da and Mercer watched her. They saw even the image lose its stiffness and dignity. The image woman waved an arm to show that she should be brought back into the cabin. Bidicat tuned her back into the room. "I owe you an apology," said the image. "I am the Lady Johanna Nade, one of the Lords of the Instrumentality." Mercer bowed, lost his balance, and had to scramble up from the floor. The Lady Da acknowledged the introduction with a royal nod. The two women looked at each other. "You will investigate," said the Lady Da, "and when you have investigated, please put us all to death. You know about the drug?" "Don't mention it," said Bidicat. "Don't even say the name into a communicator. It is a secret of the Instrumentality." "I am the Instrumentality," said the Lady Johanna. "Are you in pain? I did not think that any of you were alive. I had heard of the surgery banks on your off-limits planet, but I thought that robots tended parts of people and sent up the new grafts by rocket. Are there any people with you? Who is in charge? Who did this to the children?" Bidicat stepped in front of the image. He did not bow. "I'm in charge." "You're under people," cried the Lady Johanna. "You're a cow." "A bull, ma'am. My family is frozen back on Earth itself, and with 1,000 years service I am earning their freedom and my own. Your other questions, ma'am. I do all the work. The Dromazoa do not affect me much, though I have to cut a part off myself now and then. I throw those away. They don't go into the bank. Do you know the secret of this place?" The Lady Johanna talked to someone behind her on another world. Then she looked at Bidicat and commanded, "Just don't name the drug or talk too much about it. Tell me the rest." "We have," said Bidicat very formally, 1,321 people who can still be counted on to supply parts when the Dromazoa implant them. There are about 700 more, including Go Captain Alvarez, who have been so thoroughly absorbed by the planet that it is no use trimming them. The Empire set up this place as a point of uttermost punishment. But the Instrumentality gave secret orders for medicine," he accented the word strangely, meaning supercondomine, "to be issued so that the punishment would be counteracted. The Empire supplies our convicts. The Instrumentality distributes the surgical material." The Lady Johanna lifted her right hand in a gesture of silence and compassion. She looked around the room. Her eyes came back to the Lady Da. Perhaps she guessed what effort the Lady Da had made in order to remain standing erect while the two drugs, the supercondomine and the lifeboat drug, fought within her veins. You people can rest. I will tell you now that all things possible will be done for you. The Empire is finished. The fundamental agreement by which the instrumentality surrendered the Empire 1,000 years ago has been set aside. We did not know that you people existed. We would have found out in time, but I am sorry we did not find out sooner. Is there anything we can do for you right away? Time is what we all have, said the Lady Da. Perhaps we cannot ever leave Shale because of the Dromazoa, and the medicine, the one could be dangerous. The other must never be permitted to be known. Ooh. The Lady Johanna Nade looked. When her glance reached him, Bidicat fell to his knees and lifted his enormous hands in complete supplication. What do you want? Said she.
Ooh.
These, said Bidicat, pointing to the mutilated children. Order a stop on children. Stop it now. He commanded her with the last cry, and she accepted his command. And lady, he stopped as if shy. Yes, go on. Lady, I am unable to kill. It is not in my nature. To work, to help, but not to kill. What do I do with these? He gestured at the 4 motionless children on the floor. Keep them, she said. Just keep them. I can't, he said. There's no way to get off this planet alive. I do not have food for them in the cabin. They will die in a few hours. And governments, he added wisely, take a long, long time to do things. Can you give them the medicine? No, it would kill them if I give them that stuff first before the Dromazoa have fortified their bodily processes. The Lady Johanna Nade filled the room with tinkling laughter that was very close to weeping. Fools. Poor fools, and the more fool I. If supercondomine works only after the Dromazoa, what is the purpose of the secret? Bidicat rose to his feet, offended. He frowned, but he could not get the words with which to defend himself. The Lady Da, ex-empress of a fallen empire, addressed the other lady with ceremony and force. Put them outside so they will be touched. They will hurt. Have Bidicat give them the drug as soon as he thinks it's safe. I beg your leave, my lady. Mercer had to catch her before she fell. You've all had enough, said the Lady Johanna. A storm ship with heavily armed troops is on its way to your ferry satellite. They will seize the medical personnel and find out who committed this crime against children. Mercer dared to speak. Will you punish the guilty doctor? You speak of punishment, she cried. You! It's fair. I was punished for doing wrong. Why shouldn't he be? Punish, punish, she said to him. We will cure that doctor, and we will cure you too, if we can. Mercer began to weep. He thought of the oceans of happiness which supercondomine had brought him, forgetting the hideous pain and the deformities on Shayol. Would there be no next needle? He could not guess what life would be like off Shayol. Was there to be no more tender, fatherly Bidicat coming with his knives? He lifted his tear-stained face to the Lady Johanna Nade and choked out the words, Lady, we are all insane in this place. I do not think we want to leave. She turned her face away, moved by enormous compassion. Her next words were to Bidicat. You are wise and good. Even if you are not a human being, give them all of the drug they can take. The instrumentality will decide what to do with all of you. I will survey your planet with robot soldiers. Will the robots be safe, cowman? Bidicat did not like the thoughtless name she called him, but he held no offense. The robots will be all right, ma'am, but the Dromazoa will be excited if they cannot feed them and heal them. Send as few as you can. We do not know how the Dromazoa live or die. As few as I can, she murmured. She lifted her hand in command to some technician unimaginable distances away. The odorless smoke rose about her, and the image was gone. A shrill, cheerful voice spoke up. "I fixed your window," said the customs robot. Bidicat thanked him absent-mindedly. He helped Mercer and the Lady Dog into the doorway. When they had gotten outside, they were promptly stung by the dromazoa. It did not matter. Bidicat himself emerged, carrying the 4 children in his 2 gigantic, tender hands.
Oh, shit.
He lay the slack bodies on the ground near the cabin. He watched as the bodies went into spasm with the onset of the dromazoa. Mercer and the Lady Da saw that his brown cow eyes were rimmed with red, and that his huge cheeks were dampened by tears. Hours or centuries? Who could tell them apart? The herd went back to its usual life, except that the intervals between needles were much shorter. The once commander, Suzdal, refused the needle when he heard the news. Whenever he could walk, he followed the customs robots around as they photographed, took soil samples, and made a count of the bodies. They were particularly interested in the mountain of Go Captain Alvarez, and professed themselves uncertain as to whether there was organic life there or not. The mountain did appear to react to supercondomine, but they could find no blood, no heartbeat. Moisture, moved by the dromazoa, seemed to have replaced the once human bodily processes. 5. And then, early one morning, the sky opened. Ship after ship landed. People emerged wearing clothes. The dromazoa ignored the newcomers. Mercer, who was in a state of bliss, confusedly tried to think this through until he realized that the ships were loaded to their skins with communications machines. The people were either robots or images of persons in other places. The robots swiftly gathered toward the herd. Using wheelbarrows, they brought the hundreds of mindless people to the landing area. Mercer heard a voice he knew. It was the Lady Johanna Nade. "Set me high," she commanded. Her form rose until she seemed 1/4 the size of Alvarez. Her voice took on more volume. "Wake them all," she commanded. Robots moved among them, spraying them with a gas which was both sickening and sweet. Mercer felt his mind go clear. The supercondomine still operated in his nerves and veins, but his cortical area was free of it. He thought clearly. "I bring you," cried the compassionate feminine voice of the gigantic Lady Johanna, "the judgment of the instrumentality on the planet Shayol. Item: the surgical supplies will be maintained, and the dromazoa will not be molested. Portions of human bodies will be left here to grow, and the grafts will be collected by robots. Neither man nor homunculus will live here again. Item: the underman Bidicat of cattle extraction will be rewarded by an immediate return to Earth. He will be paid twice his expected 1,000 years of earnings." The voice of Bidicat, without amplification, was almost as loud as hers through the amplifier. He shouted his protest. "Lady! Lady!" She looked down at him, his enormous body reaching to ankle height on her swirling gown, and said in a very informal tone, "What do you want?" "Let me finish my work first," he cried, so that all could hear. "Let me finish taking care of these people." The specimens who had minds all listened attentively. The brainless ones were trying to dig themselves back into the soft earth of Shale using their powerful claws for the purpose. Whenever one began to disappear, a robot seized him by a limb and pulled him out again. Item: cephaloectomies will be performed on all persons with irrecoverable minds. Their bodies will be left here. Their heads will be taken away and killed as pleasantly as we can manage, probably by an overdosage of supercondomine. "The last big jolt," murmured Commander Suzdal, who stood near Mercer. "That's fair enough." Item: the children have been found to be the last heirs of the Empire.
Oh, come on.
An overzealous official sent them here to prevent their committing treason when they grew up. The doctor obeyed orders without questioning them. Both the official and the doctor have been cured, and their memories of this have been erased. so that they need have no shame or grief for what they have done. It's unfair, cried the half-man. They should be punished as we were. The Lady Johanna Nade looked down at him. Punishment is ended. We will give you anything you wish, but not the pain of another. I shall continue.
Wow.
Item. Since none of you wish to resume the lives which you led previously, we are moving you to another planet nearby. It is similar to Shale, but much more beautiful. There are no dromazoa. At this, an uproar seized the herd. They shouted, wept, cursed, appealed. They all wanted the needle, and if they had to stay on Shale to get it, they would stay. Item, said the gigantic image of the lady, overriding their babble with her great but feminine voice. You will not have supercondamine on the new planet, since without dromazoa it would kill you. But there will be caps. Remember the caps. We will try to cure you and to make people of you again. But if you give up, we will not force you. Caps are very powerful. With medical help, you can live under them many years. A hush fell on the group. In their various ways, they were trying to compare the electrical caps which had stimulated their pleasure lobes with the drug which had drowned them 1,000 times in pleasure. Their murmur sounded like assent. Do you have any questions? Said the Lady Johanna. When do we get the caps? Said several. They were human enough that they laughed at their own impatience. Soon, said she reassuringly. Very soon. Very soon, echoed Bedicat, reassuring his charges even though he was no longer in control. Question, cried the Lady Da. My lady, said the Lady Johanna, giving the ex-empress her due courtesy. Will we be permitted marriage? The Lady Johanna looked astonished. I don't know. She smiled. I don't know any reason why not. I claim this man, Mercer, said the Lady Da. When the drugs were deepest and the pain was greatest, he was the one who always tried to think. May I have him? Mercer thought the procedure arbitrary, but he was so happy that he said nothing. The Lady Johanna scrutinized him, and then she nodded. She lifted her arms in a gesture of blessing and farewell. The robots began to gather the pink herd into two groups. One group was to whisper in a ship over to a new world, new problems and new lives. The other group, no matter how much its members tried to scuttle into the dirt, was gathered for the last honor which humanity could pay their manhood. Bedicat, leaving everyone else, jogged with his bottle across the plain to give the mountain man Alvarez an especially large gift of delight.
What does that do?
On the gem planet.
Not this.
Consider the...
Okay. Let us go with this.
Western science is so wonderful. The Martian was sitting at the top of a granite cliff. In order to enjoy the breeze better, he had taken on the shape of a small fir tree. The wind always felt very pleasant through non-deciduous needles. At the bottom of the cliff stood an American, the first the Martian had ever seen. The American extracted from his pocket a fantastically ingenious device. It was a small metal box with a nozzle which lifted up and produced an immediate flame. From this miraculous device, the American readily lit a tube of bliss-giving herbs. The Martian understood that these were called cigarettes by the Americans. As the American finished lighting his cigarette, the Martian changed his shape to that of a 15-foot, red-faced, black-whiskered Chinese demagogue and shouted to the American in English, "Hello, friend!" The American looked up and almost dropped his teeth. The Martian stepped off the cliff and floated gently down toward the American, approaching slowly so as not to affright him too much. Nevertheless, the American did seem to be concerned because he said, "You're not real, are you? You can't be. Or can you?" Modestly, the Martian looked into the mind of the American and realized that 15-foot Chinese demagogues were not reassuring visual images in an everyday American psychology. He peeked modestly into the mind of the American, seeking a reassuring image. The first image he saw was that of the American's mother, so the Martian promptly changed into the form of the American's mother and answered, "What is real, darling?" With this, the American turned slightly green and put his hand over his eyes. The Martian looked once again into the mind of the American and saw a slightly confused image. When the American opened his eyes, the Martian had taken on the form of a Red Cross girl halfway through a striptease act. Although the maneuver was designed to be pleasant, the American was not reassured. His fear began to change into anger and he said, "What the hell are you?" The Martian gave up trying to be obliging. He changed himself into a Chinese nationalist major general with an Oxford education and said in a distinct British accent, "I'm by way of being one of the local characters, a bit on the supernatural side, you know. I do hope you do not mind. Western science is so wonderful that I had to examine that fantastic machine you have in your hand. Would you like to chat a bit before you go on?" The Martian caught a confused glimpse of images in the American's mind. They seemed to be concerned with something called prohibition, something else called on the wagon, and the reiterated question, "How the hell did I get here?" Meanwhile, the Martian examined the lighter. He handed it back to the American, who looked stunned. "Very fine magic," said the Martian. "We do not do anything of that sort in these hills.
Well,
I am a fairly low-class demon. I see that you are a captain in the illustrious Army of the United States. Allow me to introduce myself. I am the 1,387,229th Eastern subordinate incarnation of a Lohan.
fuck.
Do you have time for a chat?" The American looked at the Chinese nationalist uniform, then he looked behind him. His Chinese porters and interpreter lay like bundles of rags on the meadowy floor of the valley. They had all fainted dead away. The American held himself together long enough to say, "What is a Lohan?" "A Lohan is an R-hat," said the Martian. The American did not take in this information either, and the Martian concluded that something must have been missing from the usual amenities of getting acquainted with American officers.
Oh, hello.
Regretfully, the Martian erased all memory of himself from the mind of the American and from the minds of the swooned Chinese. He planted himself back on the cliff top, resumed the shape of a fir tree, and woke the entire gathering. He saw the Chinese interpreter gesticulating at the American, and he knew that the Chinese was saying, "There are demons in these hills."
Well, that's
The Martian rather liked the hearty laugh with which the American greeted this piece of superstitious Chinese nonsense. He watched the party disappear as they went around the miraculously beautiful little lake of the Eight-Mouthed River. That was in 1945. The Martian spent many thoughtful hours trying to materialize a lighter, but he never managed to create one which did not dissolve back into some unpleasant primordial effluvium within hours. Then, it was 1955. The Martian heard that a Soviet officer was coming, and he looked forward with genuine pleasure to making the acquaintance of another person from the miraculously up-to-date Western world. Peter Fahrer was a Volga German. The Volga Germans are about as much Russian as the Pennsylvania Dutch are Americans. They have lived in Russia for more than 200 years, but the terrible bitterness of the Second World War led to the breakup of most of their communities. Fahrer himself had fared well in this. After holding the non-commissioned rank of Yefreitor in the Red Army for some years, he had become a sub-lieutenant. In a technicum, he had studied geology and survey. The chief of the Soviet military mission to the province of Yunnan in the People's Republic of China had said to him, "Fahrer, you are getting a real holiday. There is no danger in this trip, but we do want to get an estimate on the feasibility of building a secondary mountain highway along the rock cliffs west of Lake Baku. I think well of you, Fahrer. You have lived down your German name, and you're a good Soviet citizen and officer. I know that you will not cause any trouble with our Chinese allies, or with the mountain people among whom you must travel. Go easy with them, Fahrer. They are very superstitious. We need their full support, but we can take our time to get it. The liberation of India is still a long way off, but when we must move to help the Indians throw off American imperialism, we do not want to have any soft areas in our rear." Do not push things too hard, Farrer. Be sure that you get a good technical job done, but that you make friends with everyone other than imperialist reactionary elements. Farrer nodded very seriously. You mean, Comrade Colonel, that I must make friends with everything? Everything, said the Colonel firmly. Farrer was young and he liked doing a bit of crusading on his own. I'm a militant atheist, Colonel. Do I have to be pleasant to priests? Priests, too, said the Colonel. Especially priests. The Colonel looked sharply at Farrer. You make friends with everything. Everything except women. You hear me, comrade? Stay out of trouble. Farrer saluted and went back to his desk to make preparations for the trip. 3 weeks later, Farrer was climbing up past the small cascades which led to the River of the Golden Sands, the Chinsha-Chiang, as the Long River, or Yangtze, was known locally.
Oh, fucking hell.
Beside him, there trotted Party Secretary Kung Sun. Kung Sun was a Peking aristocrat who had joined the Communist Party in his youth. Sharp-faced, sharp-voiced, he made up for his aristocracy by being the most violent communist in all of northwestern Yunnan. Though they had only a squad of troops and a lot of local bearers for their supplies, they did have an officer of the Old People's Liberation Army to assure their military well-being and to keep an eye on Farrer's technical competence. Comrade Captain Lee, roly-poly and jolly, sweated wearily behind them as they climbed the steep cliffs. Lee called after them. If you want to be heroes of labor, let's keep climbing. But if you are following sound military logistics, let's all sit down and drink some tea. We can't possibly get to Pakuhu before nightfall anyhow. Kung Sun looked back contemptuously. The ribbon of soldiers and bearers reached back 200 yards, making a snake of dust clutched to the rocky slope of the mountain. From this perspective, he saw the caps of the soldiers and the barrels of their rifles pointing upward toward him as they climbed. He saw the towel-wrapped heads of the liberated porters, and he knew without speaking to them that they were cursing him in language just as violent as the language with which they had cursed their capitalist oppressors in days gone past. Far below them all, the thread of the Chinsha-Chiang was woven like a single strand of gold into the gray-green of the Twilight Valley floor. He spat at the army captain. If you had your way about it, we'd still be sitting there in an inn drinking the hot tea while the men slept. The captain did not take offense. He had seen many party secretaries in his day. In the new China, it was much safer to be a captain. A few of the party secretaries he had known had got to be very important men. One of them had even got to Peking and had been assigned a whole Buick to himself, together with 3 Parker 51 pens. In the minds of the communist bureaucracy, this represented a state close to absolute bliss. Captain Lee wanted none of that. 2 square meals a day, and an endless succession of patriotic farm girls, preferably chubby ones, represented his view of a wholly liberated China. Farrer's Chinese was poor, but he got the intent of the argument. In thick but understandable Mandarin, he called, half laughing at them, "Come along, comrades. We may not make it to the lake by nightfall, but we certainly can't bivouac on this cliff either." He whistled "Ich hat ein Kameraden" through his teeth as he pulled ahead of Kung Sun and led the climb on up the mountain. Thus it was Farrer who first came over the lip of the cliff and met the Martian face to face. This time the Martian was ready. He remembered his disappointing experience with the American, and he did not want to affright his guest so as to spoil the social nature of the occasion. While Farrer had been climbing the cliff, the Martian had been climbing Farrer's mind, chasing in and out of Farrer's memories as happily as a squirrel chases around inside an immense oak tree. From Farrer's own mind, he had extracted a great many pleasant memories. He had then hastened back to the top of the cliff and had incorporated these in very substantial-looking phantoms. Farrer got halfway across the lip of the cliff before he realized what he was looking at. 2 Soviet military trucks were parked in a tiny glade. Each of them had tables in front of it. One of the tables was set with a very elaborate Russian zakuska, the Soviet equivalent of a smorgasbord. The Martian hoped he would be able to keep these objects materialized while Farrer ate them, but he was afraid they might disappear each time Farrer swallowed them, because the Martian was not very well acquainted with digestive processes of human beings, and did not want to give his guest a violent stomachache by allowing him to deposit through his esophagus and into his stomach objects of extremely improvised and uncertain chemical makeup. The first truck had a big red flag on it with white Russian letters reading, "Welcome to the Heroes of Bryansk." The second truck was even better. The Martian could see that Farrer was very fond of women, so he had materialized 4 very pretty Soviet girls. A blonde, a brunette, a redhead, and an albino, just to make it interesting. The Martian did not trust himself to make them all speak the correctly feminine and appealing forms of the Russian language, so, having materialized them, he set them all in lounge chairs and put them to sleep. He had wondered what form he himself should take, and decided that it would be very hospitable to assume the appearance of Mao Zedong. Farrer did not come on over the cliff. He stayed where he was. He looked at the Martian, and the Martian said very oilily, "Come on up. We are waiting for you." "Who the hell are you?" barked Farrer. "I am a pro-Soviet demon," said the apparent Mr. Mao Zedong, "and these are materialized communist hospitality arrangements. I hope you like them." At this point, both Kung Sun and Lee appeared. Lee climbed up the left side of Farrer, Kung Sun on the right. All 3 stopped, gaping. Kung Sun recovered his wits first. He recognized Mao Zedong. He never passed up a chance to get acquainted with the higher command of the Communist Party. He said in a very weak, strained, incredulous voice, "Mr. Party Chairman Mao, I never thought that we would see you here in these hills. Or, are you you? And if you aren't you, who are you?" "I am not your party chairman," said the Martian. "I am merely a local demon who has strong pro-communist sentiments and would like to meet companionable people like yourselves." At this point, Lee fainted and would have rolled back down the cliff, knocking over soldiers and porters, if the Martian had not reached out his left arm, concurrently changing the left arm into the shape of a python, picking up the unconscious Lee and resting his body gently against the side of the picnic trucks. The Soviet sleeping beauties slept on. The python turned back into an arm. Kung Sun's face had turned completely white. Since he was a pale and pleasant ivory color to start with, his whiteness had a very marked tinge. "I think this Wang Pa is a counter-revolutionary imposter," he said weakly. "But I don't know what to do about him. I am glad that the Chinese People's Republic has a representative from the Soviet Union to instruct us in difficult party procedure." Farrer snapped, "If he is a goose, he is a Chinese goose. He is not a Russian goose. You'd better not call him that dirty name. He seems to have some powers that do work. Look at what he did to Lee." The Martian decided to show off his education and said very conciliatorily, "If I am a Wang Pa, you are a Wang Pen," he added brightly in the Russian language. "That's an ingrate, you know. Much worse than an illegitimate one. Do you like my shape, Comrade Farrer? Do you have a cigarette lighter with you? Western science is so wonderful. I can never make very solid things, and you people make airplanes, atom bombs, and all sorts of refreshing entertainments of that kind." Farrer reached into his pocket, groping for his lighter. A scream sounded behind him. One of the Chinese enlisted men had left the stopped column behind and had stuck his head over the edge of the cliff to see what was happening. When he saw the trucks and the figure of Mao Zedong, he began shrieking, "There are devils here! There are devils here!" From centuries of experience, the Martian knew there was no use trying to get along with the local people unless they were very, very young or very, very old. He walked to the edge of the cliff so that all the men could see him. He expanded the shape of Mao Zedong until it was 35 feet high. Then he changed himself into the embodiment of an ancient Chinese god of war, with whiskers, ribbons, and sword tassels blowing in the breeze. They all fainted dead away, as he had intended. He packed them snugly against the rocks so that none of them would fall back down the slope. Then he took on the of a Soviet whack, a rather pretty little blonde with sergeant's insignia, and rematerialized himself beside Farrer. By this point, Farrer had his lighter out. The pretty little blonde said to Farrer, "Do you like this shape better?" Farrer said, "I don't believe this at all. I am a militant atheist. I have fought against superstition all my life." Farrer was 24.
Last time.
The Martian said, "I don't think you like me being a girl. It bothers you, doesn't it? Since you do not exist, you cannot bother me. But if you don't mind, could you please change your shape again?" The Martian took on the appearance of a chubby little Buddha. He knew this was a little impious, but he felt Farrer give a sigh of relief. Even Lee seemed cheered up, now that the Martian had taken on a proper religious form. "Listen, you obscene demonic monstrosity," snarled Kung Sun. "This is the Chinese People's Republic. You have absolutely no business taking on supernatural images or conducting unatheistic activities. Please abolish yourself and those illusions yonder. What do you want anyhow?" "I would like," said the Martian mildly, "to become a member of the Chinese Communist Party." Farrer and Kung Sun stared at each other. Then they both spoke at once, Farrer in Russian and Kung Sun in Chinese. "But we can't let you in the party." Kung Sun said, "If you're a demon, you don't exist. And if you do exist, you're illegal." The Martian smiled. "Take some refreshments. You may change your minds. Would you like a girl?" he said, pointing at the assorted Russian beauties who still slept in their lounge chairs. But Kung Sun and Farrer shook their heads. With a sigh, the Martian dematerialized the girls and replaced them with 3 striped Siberian tigers. The tigers approached. One tiger stopped cozily behind the Martian and sat down. The Martian sat on him. Said the Martian brightly, "I like tigers to sit on. They're so comfortable. Have a tiger." Farrer and Kung Sun were staring open-mouthed at their respective tigers. The tigers yawned at them and stretched out. With a tremendous effort of will, the 2 young men sat down on the ground in front of their tigers. Farrer sighed. "What do you want?" "I suppose you won this trick," said the Martian. "Have a jug of wine." He materialized a jug of wine and a porcelain cup in front of each, including himself. He poured himself a drink and looked at them through shrewd, narrowed eyes. "I would like to learn all about Western science. You see, I am a Martian student who was exiled here to become the 1,387,229th Eastern subordinate incarnation of Alohan, and I have been here more than 2,000 years, and I can only perceive in a radius of 10 leagues. Western science is very interesting. If I could, I would like to be an engineering student. But since I cannot leave this place, I would like to join the Communist Party and have many visitors come to see me." By this time, Kung Sun made up his mind. He was a communist, but he was also a Chinese, an aristocratic Chinese and a man well-versed in the folklore of his own country. Kung Sun used a politely archaic form of the Peking court dialect when he spoke again in much milder terms. "Honored, esteemed demon, sir. It's just no use at all your trying to get into the Communist Party. I admit it is very patriotic of you as a Chinese demon to want to join the progressive group which leads the Chinese people in their endless struggle against the vicious American imperialists. Even if you convinced me, I don't think you can convince the party authorities, esteemed sir. The only thing for you to do in our new communist world of the new China is to become a counter-revolutionary refugee and migrate to capitalist territory." The Martian looked hurt and sullen. He frowned at them as he sipped his wine. Behind him, Lee began snoring where he slept against the wheel of a truck. Very persuasively, the Martian began to speak. "I see, young man, that you're beginning to believe in me. You don't have to recognize me, just believe in me a little bit. I am happy to see that you, Party Secretary Kung Sun, are prepared to be polite, I am not a Chinese demon, since I was originally a Martian who was elected to the Lesser Assembly of Concord, but who made an inopportune remark and who must live on as the 1,387,229th Eastern subordinate incarnation of a Lohan for 300,000 springs and autumns before I can return. I expect to be around a very long time indeed. On the other hand, I would like to study engineering, and I think it would be much better for me to become a member of the Communist Party than to go to a strange place. Farrer had an inspiration, said he to the Martian. I have an idea. Before I explain it, though, would you please take those damned trucks away and remove that zakuska? It makes my mouth water, and I'm very sorry, but I just can't accept your hospitality. The Martian complied with a wave of his hand. The trucks and the tables disappeared. Lee had been leaning against a truck. His head went thump against the grass. He muttered something in his sleep and then resumed his snoring. The Martian turned back to his guests. Farrer picked up the thread of his own thoughts. Leaving aside the question of whether you exist or not, I can assure you that I know the Russian Communist Party, and my colleague, Comrade Kung Sun here, knows the Chinese Communist Party. Communist parties are very wonderful things. They lead the masses in the fight against wicked Americans. Do you realize that if we didn't fight on with the revolutionary struggle, all of us would have to drink Coca-Cola every day? What is Coca-Cola? Asked the demon. I don't know, replied Farrer. Then why be afraid to drink any? Don't be irrelevant. I hear that the capitalists make everybody drink it. The Communist Party cannot take time to open up supernatural secretariats. It would spoil irreligious campaigns for us to have a demonic secretary. I can tell you the Russian Communist Party won't put up with it, and our friend here will tell you there is no place in the Chinese Communist Party. We want you to be happy. You seem to be a very friendly demon. Why don't you just go away? The capitalists will welcome you. They are very reactionary and very religious. You might even find people there who would believe in you. The Martian changed his shape from that of a roly-poly Buddha and assumed the appearance and dress of a young Chinese man, a student of engineering at the University of the Revolution in Peking. In the shape of the student, he continued, I don't want to be believed in. I want to study engineering, and I want to learn all about Western science. Kung Sun came to Farrer's support. He said, It's just no use trying to be a communist engineer. You look like a very absent-minded demon to me, and I think that even if you tried to pass yourself off as a human being, you would keep forgetting and changing shapes. That would ruin the morale of any class. The Martian thought to himself that the young man had a point there. He hated keeping any one particular shape for more than half an hour. Staying in one bodily form made him itch. He also liked to change sexes every few times. It seemed sort of refreshing. He did not admit to the young man that Kung Sun had scored a point with that remark about shape-changing, but he nodded amiably at them and asked, But how could I get abroad? Just go, said Kung Sun wearily. Just go. You're a demon. You can do anything. I can't do that, snapped the student Martian. I have to have something to go by. He turned to Farrer. It won't do any good. You're giving me something. If you gave me something Russian, and I would end up in Russia, from what you say they won't want to have a communist Martian any more than these Chinese people do. I won't like to leave my beautiful lake anyhow, but I suppose I will have to if I am to get acquainted with Western science. Farrer said, I have an idea. He took off his wristwatch and handed it to the Martian. The Martian inspected it. Many years before, the watch had been manufactured in the United States of America. It had been traded by a GI to a Fräulein, by the Fräulein's grandmother to a Red Army man for 3 sacks of potatoes, and by the Red Army man for 500 rubles to Farrer when the two of them met in Kuibyshev. The numbers were painted with radium, as were the hands. The second hand was missing, so the Martian materialized a new one. He changed the shape of it several times before it fitted. On the watch, there was written in English, Marvin Watch Company. At the bottom of the face of the watch, there was the name of a town, Waterbury Con. The Martian read it. said he to Farrer. Where is this place, Waterbury Con? The Con is the short form of the name of one of the American states. If you are going to be a reactionary capitalist, that is a very good place to be a capitalist in. Still white-faced, but in a sickly, ingratiating way, Kung Sun added his bit. I think you would like Coca-Cola. It's very reactionary. The student Martian frowned. He still held the watch in his hand. Said he, I don't care whether it's reactionary or not. I want to be in a very scientific place. Fowler said, you couldn't go any place more scientific than Waterbury Con. Especially Con. That's the most scientific place they have in America. And I'm sure they are very pro-Martian, and you can join one of the capitalist parties. They won't mind, but the communist parties would make a lot of trouble for you. Farrer smiled and his eyes lit up. Furthermore, he added, as a winning point, you can keep my watch for yourself, for always. The Martian frowned. Speaking to himself, the student Martian said, I can see that Chinese communism is going to collapse in 8 years, 800 years, or 80,000 years. Perhaps I'd better go to this Waterbury Con. The two young communists nodded their heads vigorously and grinned. They both smiled at the Martian. Honored, esteemed Martian, sir, please hurry along because I want to get my men over the edge of the cliff before darkness falls. Go with our blessing. The Martian changed shape. He took on the image of an Arhat, a subordinate disciple of Buddha. 8 feet tall, he loomed above them. His face radiated unearthly calm. The watch, miraculously provided with a new strap, was firmly strapped to his left wrist. Bless you, my boys, said he. I go to Waterbury. And he did. Farrer stared at Kung Sun. What's happened to Lee? Kung Sun shook his head dazedly. I don't know. I feel funny. In departing for that marvelous, strange place, Waterbury Con, the Martian had taken with him all their memories of himself. Kung Sun walked to the edge of the cliff. Looking over, he saw the men sleeping. Look at that, he muttered. He stepped to the edge of the cliff and began shouting, Wake up, you fools! You turtles! Haven't you any more sense than to sleep on a cliff as nightfall approaches? The Martian concentrated all his powers on the location of Waterbury Con. He was the 1,387,229th Eastern subordinate incarnation of a Lohan, or an Arhat. And his powers were limited, impressive though they might seem to outsiders. With a shock, a thrill, a something of breaking, a sense of things done and undone, he found himself in flat country. Strange darkness surrounded him. Air, which he had never smelled before, flowed quietly around him. Farrer and Lee, hanging on a cliff high above the Chinsha-Chiang, lay far behind him in the world from which he had broken.
Come on.
He remembered that he had left his shape behind.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Absent-mindedly, he glanced down at himself to see what form he had taken for the trip. He discovered that he had arrived in the form of a small, laughing Buddha, 7 inches high, carved in yellowed ivory. This will never do, muttered the Martian to himself. I must take on one of the local forms. He sensed around in his environment, groping telepathically for interesting objects near him. Aha! A milk truck! Thought he, Western science is indeed very wonderful. Imagine a machine made purely for the purpose of transporting milk. Swiftly, he transferred himself into a milk truck. In the darkness, his telepathic senses had not distinguished the metal of which the milk truck was made, nor the color of the paint. In order to remain inconspicuous, he turned himself into a milk truck made of solid gold. Then, without a driver, he started up his own engine and began driving himself down one of the main highways leading into Waterbury, Connecticut. So, if you happen to be passing through Waterbury Con and see a solid gold milk truck driving itself through the streets, you'll know it's the Martian. Otherwise, the 1,387,229th Eastern subordinate incarnation of a Lohan, and that he still thinks Western science is wonderful. Nancy.
Nope.
2 men faced Gordon Green as he came into the...
let's go with... Let's go with From Gustible's Planet.
From Gustible's Planet. Shortly after the celebration of the 4,000th anniversary of the opening of space, Angry J. Gustible discovered Gustible's Planet. The discovery turned out to be a tragic mistake. Gustible's Planet was inhabited by highly intelligent life forms. They had moderate telepathic powers. They immediately mind-read Angry J. Gustible's entire mind and life history, and embarrassed him very deeply by making up an opera concerning his recent divorce. The climax of the opera portrayed his wife throwing a teacup at him. This created an unfavorable impression concerning Earth culture, and Angry J. Gustible, who held a reserve commission as a sub-chief of the instrumentality, was profoundly embarrassed to find that it was not the higher realities of Earth which he had conveyed to these people, but the unpleasant, intimate facts. As negotiations proceeded, other embarrassments developed. In physical appearance, the inhabitants of Gustible's Planet, who called themselves apishins, resembled nothing more than oversized ducks. Ducks 4 feet to 4 feet 6 in height. At their wingtips, they had developed juxtaposed thumbs. They were paddle-shaped and sufficed to feed the apishins. Gustible's Planet matched Earth in several respects. In the dishonesty of the inhabitants, in their enthusiasm for good food, in their instant capacity to understand the human mind. Before Gustible began to get ready to go back to Earth, he discovered that the apishins had copied his ship. There was no use hiding this fact. They had copied it in such detail that the discovery of Gustible's Planet meant the simultaneous discovery of Earth by the apishins.
And what did this give
The
you?
implications of this tragic development did not show up until the apishins followed him home.
Oh.
They had a planeforming ship capable of traveling in non-space just as readily as his. The most important feature of Gustible's Planet was its singularly close match to the biochemistry of Earth. The apishins were the first intelligent life forms ever met by human beings, who were at once capable of smelling and enjoying everything which human beings smelled and enjoyed, capable of following any human music with forthright pleasure, and capable of eating and drinking everything in sight. The very first apishins on Earth were greeted by somewhat alarmed ambassadors who discovered that an appetite for Munich beer, camembert cheese, tortillas, and enchiladas, as well as the better grades of chow mein, far transcended any serious cultural, political, or strategic interests which the new visitors might have. Arthur Dijon, a lord of the instrumentality who was acting for this, delegated an instrumentality agent named Calvin Dredd as the chief diplomatic officer of Earth to handle the matter. Dredd approached one Schmext, who seemed to be the Apician leader. The interview was an unfortunate one. Dredd began by saying, "Your Exalted Highness, we are delighted to welcome you to Earth." Schmext said, "Are those edible?" and proceeded to eat the plastic buttons from Calvin Dredd's formal coat, even before Dredd could say, though not edible, they were attractive. Schmext said, "Don't try to eat those, they are really not very good." Dredd, looking at his coat sagging wide open, said, "May I offer you some food?" Schmext said, "Indeed, yes." And while Schmext ate an Italian dinner, a Peking dinner, a red-hot peppery Szechuanese dinner, a Japanese sukiyaki dinner, 2 British breakfasts, a smorgasbord, and 4 complete servings of diplomatic-level Russian zakuska, he listened to the propositions of the instrumentality of Earth. These did not impress him. Schmext was intelligent, despite his gross and offensive eating habits. He pointed out, "We two worlds are equal in weapons. We can't fight. Look," said he to Calvin Dredd in a threatening tone. Calvin Dredd braced himself as he had learned to do. Schmext also braced him. For an instant, Dredd did not know what had happened. Then he realized that in putting his body into a rigid and controlled posture, he had played along with the low-grade but manipulable telepathic powers of the visitors. He was frozen rigid till Schmext laughed and released him. Schmext said, You see,
what I
we
think
are
it is?
well matched.
The box?
I can freeze you. Nothing short of utter desperation could get you out of it. If you try to fight us, we'll lick you. We are going to move in here and live with you. We have enough room on our planet. You can come and live with us, too. We would like to hire a lot of those cooks of yours. You'll simply have to divide space with us, and that's all there is to it. That really was all there was to it. Arthur DeJean reported back to the Lords of the Instrumentality that, for the time being, nothing could be done about the disgusting people from Gustible's planet. They kept their greed within bounds, by their standards. A mere 72,000 of them swept the earth, hitting every wine shop, dining hall, snack bar, soda bar, and pleasure center in the world. They ate popcorn, alfalfa, raw fruit, live fish, birds on the wing, prepared foods, cooked and canned foods, food concentrates, and assorted medicines. Outside of an enormous capacity to hold many times what the human body could tolerate in the way of food, they showed very much the same effects as persons. Thousands of them got various local diseases, sometimes called by such undignified names as the Yangtze Rapids, Delhi Belly, the Roman Gronin, or the like.
Actually,
other thousands became ill and had to relieve themselves in the fashion of ancient emperors. Still, they came. Nobody liked them. Nobody disliked them enough to wish a disastrous war. Actual trade was minimal. They bought large quantities of foodstuffs, paying in rare metals. But their economy on their own planet produced very little, which the world itself wanted. The cities of mankind had long since developed to a point of comfort and corruption, where a relatively monocultural being, such as the citizens of Gustible's planet, could not make much impression. The word apishins came to have unpleasant connotations of bad manners, greediness, and prompt payment. Prompt payment was considered rude in a credit society, but after all, it was better than not being paid at all. The tragedy of the relationship of the two groups came from the unfortunate picnic of the Lady Chow, who prided herself on having ancient Chinesian blood. She decided that it would be possible to satiate Schmext and the other apishins to a point at which they would be able to listen to reason. She arranged a feast which, for quality and quantity, had not been seen since previous historic times, long before the many interruptions of war, collapse, and rebuilding of culture. She searched the museums of the world for recipes. The dinner was set forth on the telescreens of the entire world. It was held in a pavilion built in the old Chinesian style. A soaring dream of dry bamboo and paper walls, the festival building had a thatched roof in the true ancient fashion. Paper lanterns with real candles illuminated the scene. The 50 selected apishins guests gleamed like ancient idols. Their feathers shone in the light and they clicked their paddle-like thumbs readily as they spoke, telepathically and fluently, in any Earth language which they happened to pick out of the heads of their hearers. The tragedy was fire. Fire struck the pavilion, wrecked the dinner. The Lady Chow was rescued by Calvin Dredd. The apishins fled. All of them escaped, all but one, Schmext himself. Schmext suffocated. He let out a telepathic scream which was echoed in the living voices of all the human beings, other apishins, and animals within reach, so that the television viewers of the world caught a sudden cacophony of birds shrilling, dogs barking, cats yowling, otters screeching, and one lone panda letting out a singularly high grunt. Then Schmext perished. The pity of it. The Earth leaders stood about, wondering how to solve the tragedy. On the other side of the world, the Lords of the Instrumentality watched the scene. What they saw was amazing and horrible. Calvin Dredd, cold, disciplined agent that he was, approached the ruins of the pavilion. His face was twisted in an expression which they had difficulty in understanding. It was only after he licked his lips for the 4th time, and they saw a ribbon of drool running down his chin, that they realized he had gone mad with appetite. The Lady Chow followed close behind, drawn by some remorseless force. She was out of her mind. Her eyes gleamed. She stalked like a cat. In her left hand, she held a bowl and chopsticks. The viewers all over the world watching the screen could not understand the scene. Two alarmed and dazed apishins followed the humans, wondering what was going to happen. Calvin Dredd made a sudden reach. He pulled out the body of Schmext. The fire had finished Schmext. Not a feather remained on him. And then, the flash fire, because of the peculiar dryness of the bamboo and the paper, and the thousands upon thousands of candles, had baked him. The television operator had an inspiration. He turned on the smell control.
Christ.
Throughout the planet Earth, where people had gathered to watch this unexpected and singularly interesting tragedy, there swept a smell which mankind had forgotten. It was an essence of roast duck. Beyond all imagining, it was the most delicious smell that any human being had ever smelled. Millions upon millions of human mouths watered. Throughout the world, people looked away from their sets to see if there were any apishins in the neighborhood. Just as the Lords of the Instrumentality ordered the disgusting scene cut off, Calvin Dredd and the Lady Chow began eating the roast apichin, Schmext. Within 24 hours, most of the apishins on Earth had been served. Some with cranberry sauce, others baked. Some fried Southern style. The serious leaders of Earth dreaded the consequences of such uncivilized conduct. Even as they wiped their lips and asked for one more duck sandwich, they felt that this behavior was difficult beyond all imagination. The blocks that the apishins had been able to put on human action did not operate when they were applied to human beings who, looking at an apichin, went deep into the recesses of their personality and were animated by a mad hunger which transcended all civilization. The Lords of the Instrumentality managed to round up Schmext's deputy and a few other apishins and to send them back to their ship. The soldiers watching them licked their lips. The captain tried to see if he could contrive an accident as he escorted his state visitors. Unfortunately, tripping apishins did not break their necks, and the apishins kept throwing violent mind blocks at human beings in an attempt to save themselves. One of the apishins was so undiplomatic as to ask for a chicken salad sandwich, and almost lost a wing, raw and alive, to a soldier whose appetite had been re-stimulated by reference to food. The apishins went back, the few survivors. They liked Earth well enough, and Earth food was delicious, but it was a horrible place when they considered the cannibalistic human beings who lived there. So cannibalistic that they ate ducks. The Lords of the Instrumentality were relieved to note that when the apishins left, they closed the space lane behind them. No one quite knows how they closed it, or what defenses they had. Mankind, salivating and ashamed, did not push the pursuit hotly. Instead, people tried to make up chicken, duck, goose, Cornish hen, pigeon, seagull, and other sandwiches to duplicate the incomparable taste of a genuine inhabitant of Gustable's planet. None were quite authentic, and people in their right minds were not uncivilized enough to invade another world solely for getting the inhabitants as tidbits. The Lords of the Instrumentality were happy to report to one another, and to the rest of the world at their next meeting, that the apishins had managed to close Gustable's planet altogether, and had no further interest in dealing with Earth, and appeared to possess just enough of a technological edge on human beings to stay concealed from the eyes and the appetites of men. Save for that, the apishins were almost forgotten. The confidential secretary of the Office of Interstellar Trade was astonished when the frozen intelligences of a methane planet ordered 40,000 cases of Munich beer. He suspected them of being jobbers, not consumers. But, on the instructions of his superiors, he kept the matter confidential and allowed the beer to be shipped.
Nice.
It undoubtedly went to Gustable's planet, but they did not offer any of their own citizens in exchange. The matter was closed, the napkins were folded, trade and diplomacy were at an end.
No crap.
Himself in Anachron. And time there is, and time there was, and time goes on, before, But what is the knot that binds the time, that holds it here, and more? Oh, the knot in time is a secret place. They sought in times of yore. Somewhere in space, they seek...
Fuck. Oh well, like I said, that was the last of it. And you get to hear a few short stories. Well, not that anybody really watched, probably. I don't know. I don't care, honestly. So, yeah. Anyways. Did I unlock anything? I don't think I did. Pretty sure I didn't. Nope. Okay. Oh well. Yeah. See everybody later. Actually. Nope. Save and quit. Let's go to credits. Horrible podcast. Yes. Thank you very much for this game. Anyways, yeah. See y'all later.